We got a broken 6-liter Power Stroke. Apparently he had a bunch of work done to it at another shop. It was running fine. Now it cranks, but it will not start. That's all I know. We'll see how it goes. I'm pretty rusty on these 6.0s. I haven't seen one for a long time. Most of them in our area were made into razor blades a long time ago. And this one probably should have been one of them, but yeah, I'm not here to be the vehicle viability police. My job is to get it running, so that's what we're gonna do. The starlings have taken over my backhoe. They are not happy that I'm out here. I think it's an 05 F350. It's had a plow on it. Looks pretty stock under the hood. So we got an add-on coolant filter here. And the Bully Dog air filter box with the phone cord holding the lid on. It's probably still better than the factory air filter setup. It's a terrible design. If you've ever changed one, you know what I mean. But I think all the pieces are here. I think it still even has an EGR cooler, which is unusual. Yeah, it's got the chubby rubber 35s. This is a Lariat, leather seats. But it was a pretty sharp truck when it was new. Unfortunately, the years have not been kind to it. She's got stage 4 body rot, maybe frame rot. And the box is just completely gone. All the cross members are rotted out. There's a hole in the wheel well. Looks like the diff cover's rusted through. It's leaking. Somebody put a new caliper on it. Yeah, the exhaust is hitting the bottom of the box. Looks like the muffler's gone, so they got a straight pipe on it. Typical stuff. And if you look all the way at the front there, there's a big puddle. Appears to be leaking engine oil. I'm pretty sure that the oil pan is rusted out. If I remember right, you cannot change the oil pan on this truck without pulling the engine out. Looks like a tuner, of course. Yeah, I know, ding, 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 ding. So let's just crank it. We'll see if the tach moves at all. It does. So that means that the cam sensor, or crank sensor, or whatever these have, is probably working. I guess, let's just start going through it. I don't know how anybody lives without a forklift. This thing is so handy. Welder, lathe, forklift. Could not live without them. Anyway, based on the giant puddle of oil that was under it, I guess we better start by checking the oil. These engines use oil pressure to fire the injectors, and they will not run without oil. Seen a few towed in for that over the years. And it looks like we're still in the safe zone. It's not just these trucks. I had a Jeep, like a little Renegade or something, one of those little disposable Jeeps towed in a few weeks ago, and crank, no start. I thought for sure it had a broken timing chain. It sounded like it had no compression. Turns out it was just out of oil, and it uses oil pressure to change the valve timing some way, and if it doesn't have enough oil, it doesn't build any compression. We think we've got crank signal, we've got oil. I guess we better find out if we have fuel. Okay, the easiest way to check for fuel is just to pull the cap off the fuel filter. Switch the key on and see if it comes running out. Oh yeah. Well, that's not it. Got a couple of codes. This first one, I believe, is an EGR code. I don't know if it still has an EGR valve or not. If it does, it's probably all coked up. But this P0611 fuel injection control module performance, that's not good. So we could have a FICM problem. I'm going to pull up some data. We'll see if we can figure out what's going on. I'm going to crank it. We're going to watch the ICP pressure, the injection control pressure. That's not good. Yeah, it barely moved. 15 PSI, that's not going to do it. We should have like 1,000 PSI ICP pressure while cranking. So I'm going to unplug the ICP sensor. We'll see if it'll go to a default value. Yeah, it went to 0. Let's see if it'll start. Negative. Okay, so we have no injection pressure. Not entirely sure what to make of that FICM code. Guess we won't worry too much about that right now. It's got good voltage there. Let's see if we can figure out why it has no pressure. Sketch time. Imagine we're looking inside the 6-liter Power Stroke engine. This is a HEUI system, hydraulic electronic unit injection. Pretty sure this is Caterpillar's brainchild. Don't ask me why they ever thought this was a good idea, but this is how it works. There's a high pressure oil pump at the back of the engine. It's kind of down in the valley. It's actually gear driven off of a gear on the back of the crankshaft. That pump pressurizes engine oil to a high pressure, like between 1,000 and 2,000 PSI. And it pipes that engine oil up through what's called a standpipe to an oil rail. And there's one of these on each head. And it's actually bolted to the head under the valve cover. And then the injectors actually are bolted through the oil rail. And the oil rail delivers the high pressure oil to the injectors to mechanically open them, and then, you know, they're electronically controlled by the computer. There's an IPR valve here and an ICP sensor here. They're both kind of plugged into this oil system. The IPR valve is your regulator, so it uses the reading from the pressure sensor, the ICP sensor, to open and close basically a valve and regulate the pressure inside the oil rail. So if we don't have pressure here at the ICP sensor, there's basically only 3 possibilities. We have a bad high pressure oil pump, we have a bad IPR valve, a pressure regulator, or we have a leak somewhere in this system. There's a lot of places it can leak. There's O-rings here at the injectors, there's O-rings at the STC pipe, there's O-rings in the IPR valve. You can have leaks here in this fitting. I believe it's called an STC fitting. Lots of things can go wrong. I had a chat with the customer. Apparently this thing's had more work done than Joan Rivers. Typical 6-liter Power Stroke stuff. Less than a year ago, it had head studs, head gaskets, injectors, I think a turbo. I mean, they took the cab off, they did the works. And surely they had the oil manifolds off when they did that, so I would assume that it has new O-rings, but you never know. Anyway, I don't think we're going to look for a leak just yet. I've actually got an IPR valve that I hoarded off of an engine I scrapped. The problem is there's no way to test these. And you can test the coil, but you can't test the actual mechanical regulator part. So the best thing to do is just to swap it out with a known good, which is kind of lame, but there really isn't a better way. They do make dummy plugs. You take the IPR out and you put in a dummy plug and it blocks off these ports, and it's supposed to send the system to full pressure, but it's the same amount of work, so by the time you do that you might as well just swap out the IPR. Anyway, if he's had a bunch of work done recently, there's a chance that some debris or something got knocked loose inside the oil rail or the standpipe or whatever, and it blew out the screen on the IPR valve and gunked it up. I've had that happen to me before. So I think that's our next move, is we'll pull the IPR valve out and have a look and swap it out and see what happens. It's kind of a pain. The IPR valve is actually kind of on the bottom of the turbo, clear at the back of the engine. You can get it, but it's a project. filter? How'd you know it was a filter?
Because I just guessed.
Wow, I'm impressed. Ah, of course. Got these silicone plugs. I think they're made for powder coating. Like if you don't want powder coating inside of a hole or something. They work great for plugging things, as long as you don't knock them out. We still can't even really see it. Okay, I think we can see it, just barely. There's the connector. It looks pretty good. This gizmo here is the FICM, the fuel injection control module. You see those zip ties? Those are holding the connectors on the bottom. It's a common problem on these trucks. The little tabs on the connectors break off and they won't stay connected. I've seen them with cardboard or carpet wedged underneath of the connectors between the FICM and the valve cover. Anyway, the IPR valve is, can you see it? That's it right there. Just peeking out underneath of that turbo. So in order to get that out, we have to use a special socket. This one's, I think, made by Lyle. There's a lot of companies that make a copy of this now. You pretty much have to have this socket to do the job. Even with the socket, it's not much fun. Not much fun at all. Pretty good guess, huh? So we got a tear in the screen there. Now you can buy the screen and replace it, but that's not going to solve the problem. The problem is whatever piece of junk tore the screen went inside the regulator and it's jamming things up. At least that's my guess. So I'm going to put in my possibly known good IPR and we'll see if we can get this thing to run. I think we're ready. Should run with the mass airflow sensor unplugged. At least I think it will. Won't be happy about it, but. Okay, it's not unusual for them not to start right away after you open the high pressure oil system. You get air in there and it has to bleed out. Can take a lot of cranking. I took the little screen off, but you can't see what's jamming it up. The problem with these oil control solenoids is that they basically can't flush themselves out. If you know anything about hydraulics, these work off of pilot pressure, which means that they have to have pressure in order to open. And they can't build pressure unless they can fully close. So you have this circular dependency where it needs to close in order to build pressure, and it needs pressure in order to open and flush itself out so that it can close. So once they get jammed up, there's really not much you can do. See it all the time with VVT solenoids, variable valve timing solenoids. The good thing there is they're working at a lot lower pressure. This thing is 1,000, 2,000 PSI. It doesn't take a very big chunk to blow a big hole in your screen at that kind of a pressure. Boy, it is not good under here. That rear cab mount is shot. Got a piece of wood holding the box up. I think they had the cab off to do the head gaskets. I don't know why they wouldn't have put new cab mounts on it. The rocker and the cab corner is completely gone. Same thing on the other side. Same thing on the front. Man, that trailing arm bracket does not look good. But the big problem is the oil pan. So it's just rusted out. I've never done a 6-liter. I'm not sure. I think you might be able to do it without taking the engine out. You take the engine mounts loose and pick the engine up as high as you can. I don't want to do it. He's gonna have to take it somewhere else. I got a video about doing an oil pan on a 6.7 Cummins. That's not a fun job either. The good thing is these trucks have a really heavy C-channel frame. I don't think I've ever seen one of these frames broken. One thing you have to watch, at least in our area, you guys aren't gonna believe this, but this coil spring bracket can actually break off the frame. So I think 03 was the first year for coil springs, and they ride really nice, well, compared to the leaf springs. But the bracket is riveted to the frame. I think it's got 6 rivets, and you get rust between the bracket and the frame. And then when steel rusts, it expands and you get rust jacking, and it'll actually pop the heads off the rivets or tear the bracket or whatever, and the whole thing will come off the frame. I've seen it happen before. Where the steering box bolts up is another kind of common problem area, especially if they've had a plow on them. The man says fix it, so that's what we're gonna do. Got a brand new IPR valve here, straight from the Ford dealership. Yes, they are expensive. No, I would not recommend an aftermarket part or any aftermarket electronic part for one of these engines. They have enough problems with the OEM parts. You don't want to make it worse. Okay, we are done. I'm gonna let it run for a while. Anytime you have that high pressure oil system open, you're gonna get air inside, and you need to let them bleed out. I'll run it for 20 minutes or half an hour before I give it back to the customer. Otherwise you'll have long cranks like this. Come on. There you go. Tow it in, drive it out. Can't complain about that. That's it. If you got the right tools and you can work through enough suppressed trauma, it's not too hard to fix a 6-liter. I'll be kind of curious to see what happens with these engines over the next few years. Personally, I think, at least in this area, once the trucks they're in finally rot away, it's probably going to be the end of the line for those engines. There's just no reason to keep them going. You know, nobody's doing 6-liter swaps. At least they're not swapping them in. Plenty of guys are swapping them out. It doesn't make any sense when you can buy a 7.3 Power Stroke or a 5.9 Cummins that's super reliable, it has a huge aftermarket, you can make as much power as you want. You know, I suspect these engines will just slowly fade away, and it'll get harder and harder to find parts and harder to find curmudgeons like me that remember how to work on them. It's already pretty much happened with the 6.4 Power Stroke. You know, those things had so many problems, and I couldn't even tell you the last time I saw one that was actually running. They're gone. I guess it's a circle of life. Thanks for watching. The rust just sucks. I really feel bad for this guy. This is an 01 Dodge Dakota. He had the thing completely repainted, new cab corners, all new interior. I mean, it looks like $1 million. But apparently they never looked at the frame because it is completely gone. So this little curly thing right here, that's the end of the actual steel. This is all rust. If you hit that with a sledgehammer, there'd just be a giant hole all the way through. There's already a hole right there. It's like that on both sides. It's too bad. I think it's headed for the crusher.